Hello again, everyone. Deflect here, Firm but Fair Gaming. Want to bring a video on the tank tier list. I'm gonna do easiest to hardest in this one, just to show what tanks I think are the most difficult and why I'm picking them for that reason. Blood DK. Blood DK for rotation is not that difficult. Blood DK requires you to follow two things, but basically you just want to have enough heart strikes so you can death strike. I would say in higher keys it could move to an A for. Sorry, I guess we'll label this. This will be S is easy, D is hard. In higher keys, it would stay a B. This might be an A. It's not that difficult. Your rotation to do damage is not difficult. It's not, you don't have any button bloat. You have a defensive for almost everything. I think it's one of the easier tanks to play. I don't think it is the easiest by any means, but I think it is fairly straightforward. You drop your D&D, you pop a defensive like every tank has to do going into a pack. Then you make sure you build up enough runic powers or enough power so you can death strike, which then you just hard strike, dancing room, and if you have it, like it's a fairly straightforward tank. I don't want to say it's B. It would be low A for easy difficulty. Once you learn how to do it, it's not that hard. Getting to do it correctly just requires you to track a couple things. It's not crazy. Plus, the same thing that you're doing your healing with and you heal back up is your damage. The only thing you're adding is D&D and blood boil. So it is kind of an all-in-one type tank, and that's why it is getting in the easier section. Bear Tank, if you ever played Bear Tank, it is straightforward. There's nothing comes easier than Bear Tank. There are some slight variations that you have to do a little more. There's the Moonfire build where you do a little more, but for the most part, it's a fairly straightforward tank, especially at some iterations where you are getting the builds where you just have thorns, so you just iron for iron for iron for to do damage instead of having to worry about anything else. So not only are you getting the armor benefit, you're getting the damage. And at some points it gets super easy, but it is definitely the easiest tank on here. Now that does not include if you do some crazy things with it and you're out there like owl weaving and stuff. But straightforward, the main point you will probably um you'll probably have it, and it should be relatively straightforward and easy. It's just, thrash, maul, way you go. Warrior. Warrior is a weird one. I say Warrior has a more difficult damage rotation, but it's still pretty straightforward. Like I would say the damage rotation makes it slightly harder, and what you can spell reflect will give it a little nuance. It's high B for easy difficulty. It's not crazy. For the most part, you are playing a straightforward tank that you have a good damage rotation. You got usually a shield wall or a shield block or spell reflect, something to kick off the defensives that way. You can do some crazy damage with them. They are they're middle of the pack, I would say. They're not a they're going to be great for season 1. They are going to be a tank that can spell reflect a lot. There's a lot of stuff to spell reflect season 1, so it is going to be a good pick for that. Paladins, on the other hand, to play a paladin correctly with the group utility is definitely here. But because a lot of paladins don't use the group utility, it can almost go into A. So using the group utility includes your bops, includes your shield, like everything to help the party stay alive. This is why some of the top paladins used to do Shadowlands keys with no healer. They would go around, heal them all. They'd change that a bit so you can't do it anymore, but you still have the sack, the bop, and everything else the paladin brings. So I would say to play properly, it's not, you don't have a ton of different defensive. You just mainly have to watch your consecration, make sure you're in that for the big armor gains, rotating sentinel and wings. But to know when a player needs to be sack or bopped, To know when you should bubble instead of waste it also brings into a thing. I would say with group utility, it would make it harder. Yes, I'm going to put that there, but that's with the ranking that it is using its group utility the best. Monk. Monk is a case all on its own. Monk is the only one with the ability to stagger. So with stagger brings a lot of different things. You have to keep an eye on your stagger. You have to know when to purify your stagger. You have to know when to drop. Well, you only have a few defensives, and they're on pretty decent cooldown, except Celestial Brew. And you have to know when you need to move. Now, that wouldn't be the worst thing if that's all you had to worry about, but your damage rotation involves about 7 to 8 buttons. So, it is probably the most difficult tank to play correctly, but can be one of the most rewarding when done correctly. Except the last few seasons, Monks seem to be on the back burner, and they didn't really give it enough defensives to do higher keys. It was doing some of the lowest keys out of every tank, and that's with the world best playing it. So they lack in the defensives, which kind of makes it tough, but they have more than enough utility and offensive buttons. And coming up for the war within, they got rid of a couple buttons, but they didn't get rid of all the buttons that they could have. So it is still going to be a tougher tank to play. It is actually probably the hardest tank you have to play with everything you have to do with it. And then knowing at the time when you cannot survive anymore and you would have to do the stupid kite meta, which is always a pain in the ass, but monks usually die before they can get out anyway. So it kind of doesn't work. Vengeance Demon Hunter. For the soul factor, it's not overly hard because you don't have a ton of buttons. But it's not overly easy because you don't like you couldn't put it in S tier because you have to properly rotate the buttons, I guess. Demon Spikes, Fiery Brands, and Fell Dev to make sure you have a defensive up for big hits. Once you learn the little rotation there, that's basically it. Knowing what you can grab without getting destroyed is another big thing. That comes with all tanking aspects, so it kind of involves every one of them. With that in consideration, I think it's actually easier than DK. You don't really have the most amount of choice. Using your sigils properly, it does take time, but every tank has kicks and interrupts. So saying, when you need to kick and interrupt correctly is just giving it to all of them. All of them have almost the same since the nerf to Vengeance DH. We're not including the last 2 seasons because with those sigils, it was just OP. But yes, the regular Demon Hunter tank isn't overly difficult to play. Not a lot to it. Not a lot of nuance. It's fairly straightforward. That is the tank tier list I have from easiest to hardest to play. Paladin being the wild card again. Like if you don't use this for the group utility to help your group survive, you can definitely put it up here. That's not a problem, but with the group utility in mind, I'm leaving it there. Let me know in the comments what you think is the easiest. Let me know what you think is the hardest. If you have any questions, let me know. And for future videos, hit that bell. We'll see you in the next video.